I call the meeting to order. Welcome to the meeting number 74 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. The committee is meeting today to study the question of privilege related to the member for Wellington Halton Hills and other members. We have with us today Michael Chong, MP Wellington Halton Hills. Mr. Chong, you will have up to 10 minutes for an opening statement, after which we will proceed to questions from committee members. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. Welcome to PROC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for inviting me to appear tonight. The last several weeks have been a trying time for me and my family, but it is important to note that my case is but only one of many Canadians who have been threatened on Canadian soil by authoritarian governments and who have suffered in silence. It is my hope that real change will result from what has happened, change that will strengthen our national security and intelligence to better protect all Canadians and Canadian institutions. Here's a brief outline of the facts concerning my case. I first became aware that Mr. Wei Zhou, a PRC consular official, was collecting information on my family in the PRC from his post in Toronto in a Globe and Mail report of May 1st, 2023. The report indicated Mr. Zhou was collecting this information for further potential sanctions to put pressure on me and other MPs with respect to debates going on in the House of Commons. A national security source had previously described Mr. Zhou as a suspected intelligence actor in a Globe report of February 13th, 2023. 2 years prior, on June 24th, 2021, I was briefed by CSIS on foreign interference threat activities. This briefing was general in nature and did not contain any information about Mr. Zhou. Between that first briefing I received from CSIS on June 24th, 2021 and May 1st, 2023, no one ever informed me that Mr. Zhou was collecting information on my family from his posting here in Canada. I recommend, Madam Chair, that Mr. Wei Zhou be censured by the House for his foreign interference threat activities targeting a Canadian Member of Parliament. This would send a clear message to any person in Canada that would engage in these activities that Parliament will take action to defend its members. Clearly, Mr. Zhou and representatives of the PRC in Canada have been coercively and corruptly targeting MPs on both sides of the aisle to put pressure on MPs with respect to foreign policy. In order to identify where the systemic problems are, I recommend the committee obtain the documents and tracking records related to the July 20th, 2021 CSIS Intelligence Assessment titled People's Republic of China Foreign Interference in Canada, a Critical National Security Threat. I understand, Madam Chair, from earlier testimony that an MOU has been entered into whereby CSIS notifies the House of Commons if a member might be under threat by a foreign government. In light of this MOU, I recommend that CSIS informs an individual MP directly about specific, detailed foreign interference threat activities targeting them and their family, including the identity of persons involved in those threat activities. I also recommend that CSIS informs the Speaker of the identity of any persons in Canada involved in foreign interference threat activities targeting MPs and their families, so that the Speaker can inform all members of the House of Commons of the identity of these persons. CSIS has consistently advised that sunlight and transparency is a tool Canada can use to combat foreign interference threat activities, so that the details of these threat activities are made public. That way, MPs, citizens, parties, and candidates can make informed decisions about what is going on. A similar protocol is in place in the UK House of Commons and appears to have been used at least twice in the last couple of years. Last year, MI5 informed the UK Speaker of Ms. Christine Lee, an agent of the PRC who was engaged in foreign interference threat activities. The Speaker subsequently notified all MPs via email about this individual. In another example, all British MPs were alerted via email 2 years ago by the Speaker about two individuals acting as agents of the Russian Federation. Madam Chair, I want to say something about the unauthorized releases of intelligence. These releases are injurious to national security and diminish the confidence Five Eyes allies have in the security of Canada's intelligence. These releases would not be happening in a system that is functioning properly. And that is the responsibility of the head of government, who alone is responsible for the machinery of government. These releases are a result of a government that does not release information in a controlled and timely manner to Parliament or its committees. These releases are a symptom of a national security and intelligence system that is not working, a system that is not conveying information to Parliament, its committees, its members, to political parties, or to other individuals and institutions in a controlled and timely manner. In this day and age, information is ubiquitous and voluminous. Information is going to get out. The question is whether information is released in a timely and controlled manner by the government, or it gets released as it has been released over the last several months. It is the job of the government to provide Parliament with information in a controlled and timely manner about national security and intelligence issues, whether on the issue in front of this committee tonight or on issues like the national security breaches at the government's Winnipeg lab. The matter in front of the committee would likely not have happened if the government had followed the example of peer jurisdictions, like the United Kingdom and the United States, that have a long history of briefing legislators on highly sensitive national security and intelligence issues. This is common practice in both countries and has been for decades. History shows that legislators are responsible and effective in how such information is shared and used. Canada needs to catch up and emulate the best practices of peer jurisdictions to ensure that critical national security and intelligence issues do not become bottlenecked within the bureaucracy and the executive. This can be done effectively and efficiently, and based on the UK and US models, there need not be a trade-off between national security and empowering legislators in this way. The Prime Minister's NSICOP committee is not a long-term solution. It has no standing in Parliament. It is effectively a committee of the government appointed by the Prime Minister on which MPs happen to sit. The change that is needed is institutional. I recommend that NSICOP be brought within Parliament. Canada needs an independent parliamentary national security and intelligence committee on the model of the UK and the US. I also recommend the government expeditiously introduce legislation for a foreign agents registry and commit to a public inquiry focused on PRC foreign interference threat activities. In closing, Madam Chair, Western democracies will continue to come under increased threat from foreign interference by authoritarian states. Foreign governments like the PRC and the Russian Federation will not stop trying to coercively influence our institutions to bend our actions to their interests. To think otherwise is naive. An urgent whole-of-government approach is needed for this serious long-term threat. A national security review is long overdue, and I recommend the government undertake one as soon as possible. The review must go beyond the Prime Minister and our intelligence agencies. It must involve, as an equal partner, Parliament, as the institution which is the beating heart of our democracy. The government needs to act. To not act is to make our democracy needlessly more vulnerable to the threat of foreign interference. I am confident that MPs can rise to the challenge. Let's learn from our democratic allies. Let's act now to deter future foreign interference in our democracy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci, Mr. Chong, pour vos commentaires.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chong, for your comments. And as usual, all comments go through the chairperson. We'll start with 6-minute rounds. We'll start with Mr. Cooper, followed by Ms. Sahota, Ms. Goudreau, and then Ms. Blaney. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours, 6 minutes.
Madam Chair, thank you very much, Mr. Chong, for appearing. We know, based upon what the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor informed you, that CSIS had provided the July 20th, 2021 intelligence assessment that revealed that you and your family in Hong Kong were a target of an accredited diplomat at Beijing's Toronto consulate, and that that memo had been sent to the Prime Minister's own department, as well as to relevant departments, including Global Affairs Canada. The Prime Minister claims that he first learned about this when it was reported in the Globe and Mail on May 1st. Do you believe that that is credible? And if the Prime Minister, in fact, is being truthful, that he did only learn of it on May 1st, what does that say about his fitness for office as the Prime Minister responsible for the machinery of government?
Well, I think it's important to clarify that the July 20th, 2021 intelligence assessment of CSIS was sent by CSIS to various points within the Government of Canada, including the Privy Council office. That is my understanding of what happened. What exact points other than the Privy Council office it went to is not clear. I think it's also important to note that if one is to take the Prime Minister at his word, then clearly there was a breakdown in the machinery of government. In the government's open and accountable government document, it's clear that the sole responsibility for the machinery of government is the Prime Minister's. It's also clear in that same foundational document that the Prime Minister is the lead on national security and has a special responsibility to national security. And so combining those two facts, that the Prime Minister has a special responsibility for national security and is alone responsible for the machinery of government, I think it's clear that the Prime Minister failed to architect the machinery of government in a way that would ensure that information flowed to MPs and to the House of Commons when those MPs and the House was under target of foreign interference threat activities.
There's no question that this was a significant failure, a major breakdown in a best case scenario. It may be worse than that the Prime Minister knew about this and sat on it, but taking the Prime Minister at his word, who ultimately bears responsibility for this failure?
Well, I think the machinery of government is the Prime Minister's responsibility alone, and that's not just my opinion, that's a fact. Open and accountable government makes it clear that the Prime Minister alone is responsible for the machinery of government, in other words, responsible for the architecture of the government, the organizational structure of the government, and that the structure would be established in a way that would prevent MPs being targeted from being made aware of those specific threat activities is astounding. I would add that the best practice of Five Eyes alliance allies makes it clear that other allies in the Five Eyes alliance have already have long had those procedures in place. I referenced in my opening comments a procedure that's in place, a protocol that's in place between MI5 and the UK House of Commons. And I referenced two examples of how that protocol was used in the last several years to protect the integrity of the UK Parliament from threats emanating from either an agent of the PRC or two individuals acting as agents of the Russian Federation. And so clearly that should have been put in place years ago when these threats were first raised by our intelligence community.
On May 3rd, regarding the information about the threat to your family, the Prime Minister told reporters, making a categorical statement, quote, "CSIS made the determination that it wasn't something that needed to be raised to a higher level because it wasn't a significant enough concern," close quote. So it wasn't just that the Prime Minister said he didn't know. He made the categorical statement that CSIS made a determination not to pass the information on. The very next day, the Prime Minister's own national security advisor contradicted the Prime Minister. In other words, what the Prime Minister said was not true. Did that give you any further confidence in the ability of this Prime Minister to do his job and keep Canadians safe from Beijing's interference?
Well, I think there was clearly a systemic breakdown in the machinery of government, and that's why I think it's really important for the committee to understand where this information went. My understanding is that CSIS does not produce intelligence products for itself. It produces intelligence products such as the intelligence assessment in question here for one of the points outside of CSIS within the Government of Canada. I believe there are 17 national security points within the Government of Canada. And so I think it's important that the committee find out through tracking records where exactly this information about me and other MPs being targeted went within the Government of Canada, where the information about Mr. Wade Joe went within the Government of Canada, so that the committee can produce a report with recommendations about how to address these systemic failures.
Do I have time? 5 seconds? Well, okay, we'll pick it up in the next round.